And we're back. Hello, everybody, and welcome to EdTech in the Bend. My name is Seth Ponder, and I am part of the EdTech in the Bend team. As people are starting to join us from Facebook and YouTube, please remember that you can use the comments on the side to ask questions and join in. So we're just going to practice it right now. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you are watching from. I want to also start by thanking South Bend Community Schools for helping sponsor this. And now I'm going to hand it over to Holly.
Hi, and welcome back. Hope you guys had a great lunch. I'm Holly Swartz, and I'm one of the EdTech in the Bend team. I would like to welcome right now Mr. Eric Curts, kind of Mr. Google if you've been online anywhere, or look for a slide or 10 things to do googly with art or science or math, or the list goes on and on. I have been watching him and talking to him for a while. We both have a love of the TV show Alone, and if you haven't watched it, it's a great thing to watch. So once again, I'd just like to welcome from Ohio our friend Mr. Eric Curts.
Well, hey guys, thank you so very much for having me. And yes, I do agree. The show Alone, I think we all kind of feel with the pandemic, with sheltering in place, we've all kind of felt that a spiritual connection with that show. But yeah, I went so far as to hang a hammock up in my backyard and spend the night sleeping in my hammock just to really, really embrace it. But I did not tap out until morning, so I made it all the way through. But well, guys, thank you so very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you guys today. I'm going to be sharing a session called The Big Blank Wall. But before I dive into all the details on that, I want to do a little housekeeping. And one of them is I am running a Pear Deck session alongside of this presentation today to give you guys a chance to do a little bit of participation. Now, certainly you can continue to chat as you normally would be as you're watching this, but there's going to be maybe 5 or 6 questions during the presentation where I would love to get feedback from the whole group. And so if you don't mind, if you would like to, I would encourage you to join this Pear Deck session while we're going through this session. And if you're not familiar with how to do that, what you would do is you would go to the website joinpd.com, and then when you get there, it would ask for a code. And the code that we'll be using today, you can see here on the screen, GDUVF. Now, I think Seth may have also shared out a link, and if you see that separately, that is perfectly fine too. You can just, there's a link you can click on that will just boom, get you right there. But for everybody else, if you want to go to the website and then type in the code, I'll leave that up on the screen for a moment. We can certainly circle back around to it if we need to do that later as well, to be able to get everybody who wants to join. Of course, again, totally optional. You don't have to, but it will definitely help out as we get to a couple of key moments throughout the presentation where it would be awesome to get sort of the ideas from the whole group. So again, that website is joinpd.com, like join Pear Deck, joinpd.com. And then the code for this particular session today is GDUVF, and that will get you into that. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit more introductory type things here, and hopefully that'll give you time to get that typed in. And again, if you haven't done that yet, you can just jot the code down. I can bring it back up on the screen later if need be. So as far as a quick introduction, so howdy, my name is Eric. I am a technology integration specialist up in Northeast Ohio. So this is heading into my 29th year in education. Started off as a middle school math teacher. We'll actually talk a little bit about that later on here. Did that for 7 years before moving into a role as a tech integration person, like a tech coach. And I've been doing that ever since. So went from teaching students to teaching teachers, all about how to use technology in creative ways. My day job is working with about 35 schools school districts up here in Northeast Ohio. And then on the side, I run my website, controlaltachieve.com. So if you're not familiar with that site, when you get some time, I would definitely encourage you to check it out, to go visit. There's loads and loads and loads of resources there at controlaltachieve.com. The homepage is the blog, and you can scroll through hundreds and hundreds of blog posts, or you can use the labels on the side if you want to find a blog post within one of those categories there. And there's also a search box. If you say, I know Eric has something on his site about XYZ, well, you can just go in there and search for it and should be able to find it well. Across the top, I also have a tab called Resources that has a lot of the same information, but just organized more by topic. And then I have a podcast tab where I periodically do an audio podcast to go along with the blog if you prefer to listen. There's a webinars tab if you prefer to watch, where I've got quite a few video trainings that have been done in the past. And if you want something in a physical form, we now have that too. We've got the Control Alt Achieve book that came out here just a few months ago, and the Control Alt Achieve book contains dozens and dozens of creative ways for your students to use Google tools, things you can just turn right around and use the very next day in class with your students. So pretty much however you want to consume the information, you can read it on the blog, you can listen to it on the podcast, watch it through the webinars, or hold it in your hand with the books. So just about any method that works for you, I hope you can find and enjoy all of that. And then the last thing I'll mention before we leave the website, Control Alt Achieve, is on the far right, I also have a link to a side blog I do called Eric the Rad. And so in addition to my love for technology and such, I also have a love for well-being and mental health and emotional health and things like that. And so I do a side blog where I share a lot of stuff along those lines, which is so important, especially now with COVID and everything we've gone through. I think we all definitely have some life challenges. And so that is a side blog that I would definitely encourage you to check out as well, if that's something that interests you. Today, though, we're going to be focusing on, as we said, the big blank wall. That is going to be our topic that we're going to be looking at, and it deals with embracing change, which, boy, I tell you, of all times to talk about embracing change, wow, we sure have had to do that. This has been, a time more than ever that's been the case. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here in just a minute, but wanted to give one more chance to share the Pear Deck code. If anybody has not had a chance yet to join and still wants to, you can head to joinpd.com, and then you can type in the code GDUVF to join into this session. And we will jump back and forth between my regular slideshow and the Pear Deck slideshow as we go through this here today. All right, very good, awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and we'll get into our session now. All right. So to begin with, we're going to take a trip back to 1992 to kick off our little discussion here today. So if you were listening when I was running through the little introduction there about myself, I think I'd mentioned that I was heading into my 29th year in education. So I finished 28 years. So with a little math, you can probably figure out why we're starting off in 1992, because 1992 was the year that I first started teaching. And there we go. Yes, there is me. It's kind of funny looking at myself here because I can see the thumbnail of the live me versus this picture of when I first started teaching. Same quantity of hair, it's just moved. It has migrated from the top of my head down to my beard instead. But yes, 1992 was the first year I started teaching. I was an 8th grade math teacher and was so excited to do that. And that is going to bring us to our very first Pear Deck question. And I'll go ahead and launch that here in a second. But that is, I'd love to know about you guys. How many years have you been in education? So let me go ahead. I'm going to start our Pear Deck class over here on the side, and that should bring up that first question for you guys. So for those who have joined our Pear Deck session, you can go ahead and type in a number there. And so the question is, how many years have you been in education? And then what I can do, if you haven't used Pear Deck, by the way, Pear Deck is a free tool. There is a paid version, but I'm just using the free version here today. They're an awesome company. And Pear Deck is a free tool that works with Google Slides, and it allows you to do exactly what we're doing right now. It allows you to ask questions during a slideshow so that people can respond, and it gives all of your students in class a voice. So everybody can answer, and it's a great way to do formative assessments. It's a great way to brainstorm in class. It's just a great way to make your instruction more interactive, especially if you're teaching like we are here through a video conference, to be able to make it more engaging and more interactive for your students. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to click on the Show Responses tab, and it should show us. There we go. And there is our data for how many years people have been in education. It looks like we have a really awesome distribution here today. Looks like we've got some folks that are just starting out with 1 year in education. And up here, we're looking like probably somewhere in the, I'm going to say that's going to be in the 40s. I can't tell for sure exactly what that dot is, but that looks like up in the 40s. So an amazing spread of experience here today. And that is fantastic. Thank you for all of the folks who have joined the Pear Deck session and are sharing those ideas. Well, anytime I do this, it always helps me know too, as far as the audience I'm speaking to, because like I said, I'm heading into my 29th year, so I'd be pretty far up up here in this range here. And so my guess is there's probably a bunch of folks here today that back in 1992, when I was first starting teaching, you probably were a student. You were probably in school at that time. Although, I don't know, taking a look at this this chart, I have a feeling we've got a few folks that weren't alive yet at that point. We got a couple of red dots here that were not actually living at the time, which always makes me feel very seasoned, let's just say. Well, anyway, 1992 was when I started teaching, and this was my classroom. So here's what my classroom looked like. I was on the third floor of North Canton Middle School. And I don't know, of course, my little video of me, my live video, the inset's a little hard to see right now, but over my left-hand shoulder, I can still see on my little nerd wall behind me. Oh, there it goes. Here, I'll point to it. That little thing says 301, right where my thumb is pointing. That was the actual room sign that stuck outside my door. So I still have that as a memory. So yeah, I always have that over my shoulder anytime I'm presenting. So this was room 301. And, listen, I was so happy to have a job, but thinking back and reflecting on it, it wasn't the greatest building. I don't know if you've taught in some buildings that are a little bit older and maybe struggle a little bit. Yeah. This building was a bit older, so we did not have air conditioning, so it was very hot. Did not have much electricity. If you look in the back here, you can sort of see I've got some outlets there between the lockers. That was the only one of two sets of outlets in the entire room. So there wasn't much electricity. And if you plugged in too much, well, you would actually create a brownout on one side of the building. So probably good that we didn't have more outlets. And the floors squeaked really bad. I was on the third floor, felt terrible for the person below me. But one of the weirdest things about the building, again, it's just an old building built long ago. One of the weirdest things was how tall the ceilings were. And so when you look at this picture here, these lockers that you're seeing, those are not like mini little small lockers. Those are full-sized human adult lockers. And it's just the ceiling was so tall. There was this gigantic big blank wall in the back of my classroom. Now, this building does not even exist anymore, by the way. It has been torn down several years ago, and now there's a soccer field there. But before that happened, I was able to sneak in, like I said, well, not sneak in. I work for the school, so I was able to go back in and take that sign off of the wall so that I would have that. But thinking back to this room, one of my big challenges as a first-year teacher was I wanted my classroom to be engaging. I wanted it to be welcoming. I wanted it to be exciting. And, well, I had this gigantic, big blank wall in the back of my classroom that just felt I don't know, it felt institutional. It just felt like this big gray, blank space back there. And that's not really what I wanted. I wanted to have a room that was more exciting and inviting for the students. Well, I wasn't rolling in the big teacher bucks just yet, so I wasn't sure how am I gonna do this, and I came up with a solution that would cost me nothing and still make my room very, very exciting and inviting. So it turns out back in 1992, for those people whose red dots were way on the far left-hand side of our chart here, back in 1992, we had places called video rental stores, and you could go into these video rental stores and, of course, rent a VHS tape, not even a DVD. These are VHS tapes, and they were all around town. We had video rental stores everywhere. But one thing that was really cool about these video rental stores was not only did they offer movies, but plastered all around the store, they had posters. They would have movie posters. And so as they would get new movies in throughout the month, they would hang up the posters, or to advertise a movie that was coming, they would have the posters hanging up. And so I went into all of the different rental stores around town and I said, hey, what do you do with those posters when the movies come and gone and something new is coming out and you want to put up a new poster? And they're like, we usually just get rid of them. I'm like, oh. I said, would you mind? Could you hang on to those? Would I be able to come in maybe every couple of weeks and see if there's any good ones that I could take and put in my classroom at school? Well, they were kind and they had pity on this poor math teacher and they allowed me to do that. And it was wonderful. It was such a great solution. So basically, I would climb up on top of those lockers and I would stick these movie posters along the back of my wall. And then, once a month, I would take them down and put up a whole new set. But what I did was I even incorporated it into what I did in my math class. So I was a math teacher, so I'd do like a problem of the week. And if you solved the problem of the week and you turned in your name for that, then you would go into a drawing to get a poster. And so for each class period of the day, I would draw somebody from the jar of the problem of the weeks, and they would get to pick which poster they wanted as I took them down. And so the kids were excited, and I loved it because I got to share my love of movies, and it gives us something to talk about. Oh, did you see that? Yeah, I saw that. Oh, that was so awesome. And it also just made the classroom colorful and exciting, and it was free, which was perfect, again, for a poor first-year math teacher. And so that went on for several years. It was just a great, great solution, and kind of became a thing that I did. One of my classroom, things that I always could rely on. Well, a couple years later, turns out we got to move out of that old building. And that's a good thing because, like I said, it was a really, really old building. And as I showed, it's been torn down, since then. Well, back then we used to have two high schools in North Canton. We had a North Campus and a South Campus, and they decided they were going to combine the two high schools together, build onto the North Campus. And you know what? We're going to give you guys the South Campus. And so, it was so exciting. We all were so thrilled to head over to what was going to be our new classrooms over at the South Campus, which was the new middle school. And it was really nice. It truly was. I mean, we had air conditioning. We had loads and loads of electricity. There were outlets all around the room. It was really bright, really nice, lights and big windows. But I'm sure you know where I'm going here. There was one thing that I didn't have in my classroom, which was we did not have tall ceilings. We had normal ceilings. we had regular ceilings there. And I remember standing in that classroom, and I still remember as plain as day thinking, oh my goodness, where am I going to hang my posters? Where am I going to put my posters? I'm standing there looking around the classroom. I've got a big bank of windows on one wall. Then I've got a whiteboard on the side wall, whiteboards on the front wall. I've got chalkboards down the other side wall. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, there's nowhere to fit my posters. And I'm running through ideas. I'm thinking, well, I guess I could give up one of my whiteboards or give up, a whole set of chalkboards. I guess I could, but those are valid. Those are good. I really could use those for students going up and doing work at the board. Oh, okay. So then I thought maybe I could turn them sideways. I was thinking, maybe they would just fit above the boards. I know I was also thinking, what about the ceiling? Maybe there's some way I can hang them from the ceiling, which I'm sure, fire code would not allow me to do that. And I remember standing there actually getting frustrated. I wasn't feeling good about this. I was really, really frustrated trying to figure this out. And then it hit me. It finally dawned on me. It finally hit me. I went, what on earth am I doing? What? Oh my goodness. The only reason I had movie posters was because I had a big blank wall that I was trying to cover up. I don't have a big blank wall anymore. I was so used to doing things a certain way that I just couldn't think how to do it differently. And we do that as teachers. I totally get it. We find things that work. We find routines that we're comfortable with. Like, I finally got it figured out. It's working. It's working smoothly. Don't change that. I'm happy with what I've got. And it made my class bright, and it allowed me to share my interests with the kids and learn about theirs and motivate them to do a problem of the week. All of that was awesome. But now here I was in a classroom that didn't have the problem I was trying to fix. It didn't have a big blank wall. And I realized as I thought about that, what I was getting confused on. I was getting confused on the difference between purpose and process. It's really common. We do this. This happens to us as humans. It's a normal thing. In my case, my process was hanging up movie posters in my classroom. That's just something I always did. I was used to it. I relied on it. That's how I did things. But why was I doing it? What was the purpose of that? I had to really kind of step back and think about that. And it was to create an engaging classroom. Ultimately, that's what I was trying to do. And I realized, maybe there's other ways to do that. And there were. And yes, it meant a little growth. It meant moving out of my comfort zone. It meant change. But I figured out other ways to engage my students, other ways to make my classroom attractive, other things I could hang up and other things I could do, and new routines developed out of that. Well, that was, again, quite a long time ago. I mean, this was a couple years into my teaching. Well, I taught for a few more years. Like I said, I taught for 7 years. And then I moved into a role as a technology coach, a tech integration specialist. But this idea hung with me. It stayed with me. And I thought, if I could do this with movie posters, what's the chance that we could do this with technology as well? Because I had a new job now. My job was to convince teachers to embrace technology. My job was to convince them to use computers and to use the internet and to use technology. And that was a change, just like it was for me to try to change in my classroom. I was asking for a change for the teachers I supported. And so I kept thinking, do we also sometimes get confused about purpose and process when it comes to technology? So let's do this. We're going to take a look at 3 quick examples of, and I mean, we could pick so many more than these. These are just 3 simple examples. And for each one, I'm going to ask for some feedback from you guys. So again, if you haven't joined the Pear Deck session, I've seen the code scroll by a couple of times. So you can still go to joinpd.com and use that code. I think it's GDUVF, I believe. Yep. You can jump into that still if you want to participate in some of that feedback. But let's take a look. Let's take a look at 3 just simple examples from technology where this may happen to us as well, or maybe it has happened. Okay, so for the first one, how about these guys? Printers. Okay, so I think printing is something that has always been a part of education. It's always been a part of schools. Now, maybe not these exact printers here. When I first started teaching, we had mimeograph machines. Now, those of you whose dots are way up on the far right side with me, you may know what I'm talking about there. The mimeograph machine was this little machine you would crank, and you would put a master copy through, like a main one that you want to make copies of, and then all of these additional blank pages would go through, and they would make copies with like a purple ink, kind of a purpley blue ink. But the thing that I'm sure anybody who used those that will think about was the smell that they created. So whenever you would make these mimeograph copies and you'd go and hand them out to your students, the very first thing everybody would do is just take them and go and smell those. So for those of you whose red dots are on the far right-hand side, you probably do remember what that smelled like. But over the years, it's always been something, whether it was mimeograph machines or copy machines or desk jets or laser jets or whatever the case would be. Printing has always been a part of school. And then things start to change. We start to get Chromebooks. We start to get iPads. Students start to do, BYOD, and they bring in their phones or whatever the case might be. And one of the first questions that we get is, how do students print from these? Because that may not be something that we've got set up easily for an iPad or a Chromebook or for a phone to print to. Well, that brings up the question about printing. Is printing a purpose or a process? Well, of course, it's a process. It's a thing we do. We print stuff. Well, when we start running into these difficulties with Chromebooks and phones and iPads and so forth, we need to step back and ask ourselves, well, what's the purpose of printing? Why are we printing? And typically it's to share information. And I'm sure there's lots of other reasons we might do it. But typically, if you're printing something, you're trying to share information. Maybe it's you sharing it with your students. Maybe it's student to student. Maybe it's you sharing to the parents. Maybe it's a student sharing something to you, trying to give you information about something that they've done. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against printing. There are papers all over my desk here. I still do use paper. But printing is just a process. It's one way. What other ways could we maybe achieve this purpose of sharing information? So there's no right answer here, but let's brainstorm that. Let's jump to our next Pear Deck slide here, which is, instead of printing, what are some other ways that teachers and students and even parents could share information? How can we give information to our students, to our parents, students to each other, students to us? And again, there's no right answer here. Just feel free to brainstorm whatever you think would be a way to share information besides printing. Let's take a look at some of the things that are starting to come in here. We've got things like email, of course, texting, tweeting, we've got blogging, absolutely. Google Sites, yes, great way to be able to get information out. Google Classroom, of course, we can share so much resources through Google Classroom. And online newsletter, digital presentations, Class Dojo. Google Slides is showing up as well here. Remind. More Google Classroom, Seesaw, yes, of course, using Google Documents and adding comments into a document. Yes, these are all fantastic. Padlet just showed up as well. On and on and on. Zoom, yes, absolutely. These are all great. Brightspace just showed up on the list. And again, there's no right answer to this. The point is, just be amazed by how many answers there are. There are so many ways that we can share information rather than putting it on a piece of paper. And again, it's not that there's anything wrong with printing things out, but there are definite benefits that we get when we go digital. If it's digital, then, well, it's harder to lose because if you do lose something, you can just go back to Google Classroom. You can just print it out again or access it again, or you can go to Google Sites and you can access and read it. Also, it allows us to communicate with a broader audience. If we're talking about sharing with the parents, and we have a Google site, well, maybe other people than just the parents want to be able to see it, maybe, grandparents or community members. And if we don't have to be printing it, then we can share it with a much broader audience. Also, when you go digital, you get the benefit of things like accessibility tools. Think about using a tool like Read and Write to be able to read the text aloud to us, or to be able to zoom in and zoom out in Chrome, or the ability to include multimedia. So it's not just a printed piece of paper, but it's got audio, it's got video embedded in it. All of those things can make it not just different, but can actually give us additional benefits. All right, so that's one thing that we're probably used to. Let's do number two. Something else that we probably are used to in education is paper and pencil assessments. And we've, again, had these forever. Nothing wrong with these at all. Perfectly fine to put a piece of paper, in front of somebody and a pencil and take a pencil and paper quiz. But again, it is, of course, just a process. The purpose of why we do that is to assess student learning. And especially during the pandemic, we haven't been able to do that. We haven't been able to just put a piece of paper and pencil in front of a student and have them fill something out that we've passed out through the classroom. We've had to get inventive. We've had to think of other processes. So yeah, let's do the same thing. What are some other ways that we can assess student learning? How can we understand what they've mastered rather than just a paper and pencil test? And again, no right answer to this. There's loads of ways that this can be done, lots of other processes that serve this purpose. Let's look at some of the examples we are getting here. So Flipgrid, absolutely. What a great way for students to be able to record themselves and share their understanding. Kahoot, yes, of course. Quizlet, Quizzes, creating website portfolios. Yep, we've got a local school that does that, where the students create a portfolio through Google Sites. Making videos with Screencastify. Yes, great way for students to be able to share their understanding. How about Google Forms? You got it. Absolutely. Google Forms will allow you to be able to do quizzes that are self-grading so that you can know right away whether the students understand the material or not. And if we just keep on going down the line, there are so many ideas. Creating something, yes, it doesn't have to be just a regular paper pencil assessment. Have the students making something. Blog, Screencastify, Flipgrid, Google Forms, project-based learning, Minecraft for design, open-ended questions, on and on and on down the line. These are fantastic, yeah. Now, in addition to all of those, we're actually doing one right now, which somebody mentioned, which is Pear Deck. Yeah, Pear Deck itself is a great example of doing a formative assessment, for example, without actually giving a paper pencil. So I've got a couple more slides after this one, just if you haven't played with Pear Deck, just to show you what that could look like. So in addition to what you guys have been doing so far, you put in how many years you've been teaching, you've answered a few open-ended questions. Let's jump on to a couple other examples. Like, for example, here's a drag and drop slide in Pear Deck. How excited are you to go back to school? And so we've got, you should have a little blue dot that you can drag around on the screen there, and you can put it on Bring It On, School Is My Life, all the way over to No, Where Did the Summer Go? Or, well, it depends on what's on Netflix to binge. And if we take a look at that, we can see our blue dots are starting to move around on the screen as people are starting to vote, as they're starting to submit their answers there. And so a tool like Pear Deck would allow not just, open-ended responses, but also drag and drop type activities. Let's take a look at another one. How about just a multiple choice question? What kind of device are you using? Are you on a Windows, Mac, Chromebook? What sort of device are you currently using? Oh, and by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier. I apologize. Pear Deck also runs nicely on mobile as well. So if you wanted to use your phone to connect to Pear Deck or an iPad, you can certainly do that as well. But for this example, I just picked a Windows, Mac, and Chromebook. Let's see the responses. There we go. So we're just getting in this one. There's no right answer to this. It's just more of a survey. But so you could do an ABCD type of a question for quick formative feedback from your students. Let's do one more example of getting assessment information from students. How about this one? This is a drawing slide. What is the farthest you've traveled? So you can take the pencil and you can pick a color and a thickness, and you can put a dot or a circle or an arrow. You can mark up on the map to show where you've traveled and talk about, wow, doesn't this open up possibilities? If you're wanting students to be able to illustrate something like draw an example of a first class lever, or draw two different quadrilaterals, or solve a problem by writing it out, and they can actually draw it out with stuff that might be hard to type up otherwise. Let's see how we're doing here. Oh my gosh, getting a lot of world travelers here. I'm just superimposing all of these on top of each other. We've got folks who have traveled the world here. Yeah, that's fantastic. Very, very nice. Got folks over in Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii. Very, very good. Yeah. So those are just some examples of, rather than using a paper pencil assessment, using something like Pear Deck or using many of the other tools you guys have mentioned as ways to be able to collect information. All right, just one more of these. and then we'll kind of scratch our head and think about something a little different based on all of this. So next up, in addition to using paper pencil assessments and finding new ways for doing that, our third and final example is this one. So what is this? This is lecturing from the front of the classroom. And yes, this is something that we've done, for many years throughout our careers. We have stood up in front of the classroom and we have been the sage on the stage. We have given the information to our students. We have been the dispenser of knowledge. Well, again, with COVID, with the pandemic, that has really changed how this happens. And so we've really got to step back and think about this idea of doing instruction, from the front of the classroom. Well, lecturing from the front of the room, that's a process. The purpose of this, well, I guess the big idea is we're trying to provide learning opportunities. That's really what we're trying to do. If I'm standing up in front of the class teaching, I'm trying to help my students learn something new. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are absolutely times when standing up in front and speaking makes the most sense. But if we haven't, I tell you, if we've learned anything through this process with the pandemic, is that there are so many other ways our students can learn. So for our third and final brainstorming on this, let's ask that question, which is, instead of you standing up in front of the class as a teacher giving a lecture, how else can students learn? What are other ways a student can learn information besides us being that sole dispenser of knowledge, standing up in front of the classroom doing that? And again, no right answers here, just lots and lots and lots of different options, I'm sure. And I'm seeing things like, student-to-student instruction, absolutely. A flipped classroom. That makes perfect sense, letting students watch videos ahead of time. And then when we get together, we can go deeper. Doing a jigsaw method, of course, where we break things up among the different groups of students. Think, pair, share, investigation, web quests. Yes, of course. Project-based learning, love that. Giving students a project to work through and really use critical thinking on that. Internet research, having the teacher be a facilitator for a group. Love that. YouTube videos, absolutely. I mean, think about that. How many of us have learned how to do something because of a YouTube video? Without a doubt. There are so many things that over the years have broken in my house that I'm like, I don't want to have to pay for somebody to come out because I know how expensive this is going to be, and so you go on YouTube and you type in, the make and model of the sink faucet that's no longer working. And guess what? There's a YouTube video where somebody shows you exactly how to take it apart and put in the new little part that costs $2, that fixes it. And I have learned so many things in my life by watching a YouTube video, and so can our students. Absolutely. We have other things here: PBL, Genius Hour, Collaboration, Khan Academy, Edu Protocols, Canvas, YouTube, PBL again. Yes, all of these are fantastic ideas on how students can learn. All right, I love that. And so that's the idea of what we're saying here, is that, yes, it's great if we can stand up in front and teach, but there's an awful lot of benefits that come from other processes where the students get to be more engaged, where they are maybe, in this example, doing a project-based learning activity with their peers, or maybe they're using a Google Meet, or they're using Zoom or whatever, and they're connecting with other students across the country, or they're connecting with an author or an expert, or maybe they're using the Science Journal app and they're recording real world data, or maybe they're using the Google Expeditions app and they're going on virtual field trips. And all of these can be way more engaging for our students to allow them to be able to take ownership of their own learning. I love this comic that really puts a point on this. It says, "Life Before Google, a short story." The one character says, "I just thought of something I'd like to know more about." And the other says, "That's a darn shame." The end. And that's true. I mean, before we had the technology we have now, if I wanted to know something when I was a kid, I would, of course, go to my public library, but it wasn't open all the time. I mean, it would close in the evenings or wouldn't be open on a Sunday, or maybe somebody grabbed volume T of the encyclopedia, so I'm not learning anything that starts with the letter T that day, But now our students can hold in their hand, the entire sum of the knowledge of human history. Everything can be there just on their phone, their tablet, their Chromebook, and so forth. All right, fantastic. Well, All of this is good. Hopefully, we're seeing a lot of really good positive things about this. But I still know, even with saying all that, it's change. It's a challenge because we're talking about doing things differently. We're used to perhaps standing up in front of the class, or we're used to giving paper pencil assessments, or we're used to printing things out, or you fill in the blank. And yeah, this moves us out of our comfort zone. There is a fear of change that comes from this because we are needing to break from our habits. It worked. We've done it a certain way, just like me with my classroom and hanging up my movie posters. And that was the way I always did it. Well, the thing is, just like with my movie posters and that having to change, well, guys, our classrooms are changing too. Just like I moved into a new classroom that year, well, we've all kind of moved into a new classroom as well, a very different classroom where we've been instructing, from our homes. And when we go back in the fall, even if we are back in our regular classroom, it still is different because the world is constantly changing around us. This time it was the pandemic. Next time, it may be something totally different. And the point is, it's always going to be changing. So let's do this. Let's take a moment. Let's think about that change for just a little bit. Let's take a step back and think about how our classroom is not the same because the world is changing around us. And to do that, we're going to go even a little further back in time. We started off in 1992. Let's take another little side trip and go just a little bit further back in time. And let's take a look at this. Jobs that no longer exist. So what I've got just a few pictures, not a whole bunch here, but a few pictures we're going to run through that show you real jobs that people used to have that when they got them, they probably thought, I am set for life. I'm good. I got this job. Good to go. And these jobs, they don't even exist anymore. Technology has come along and has changed things, and we don't even have these jobs anymore. What I want to do is see if you can identify these. And again, I don't have a specific way for you to just shout out the answer. If you want to throw it in the chat and the comments, you certainly can. I'll pause for a moment on each of these if anybody wants to holler out these. I don't have this tied into the Pear Deck session, but let's go ahead and take a look at some of these. So, for example, here is our first job. This one's probably not too difficult to be able to identify here, and that is bowling alley pin setter. Yeah, absolutely. So bowling alley pin setter used to be a job you could get. Nowadays, of course, technology has come along and you're not even allowed to go past the foul line in bowling and go anywhere near the end of the aisle or the alley, or they'll throw you out. And my guess is, in addition to how technology has replaced this, probably some child labor laws would keep this from happening as well. Let's look at another job from the past. How about this one? What job are we looking at here? We've got folks with wires plugging them into this giant board here on the wall, and these were switchboard operators. So yeah, if you were going to make a phone call, somebody was literally connecting you to somebody else. And now, of course, that's all done through technology. Nobody is, physically going in and plugging in, one end of a wire to another. Technology has done that, and this job is obsolete. How about this one? We've got a whole bunch of folks here dressed in some really warm clothes. They're holding some saws. These folks are ice cutters. Yeah, so before we had refrigeration and freezers, we had to cut giant blocks of ice out of the river to be able to have these pulled into a big ice house, a big barn, and we would put sawdust between each of the giant blocks of ice to keep them from melting, so that in the summer people could go out to the ice house and bring in could bring in some ice to your ice box inside the house to keep your food refrigerated. Well, now this job is no longer needed since we have technology to replace that with refrigerators and freezers. Next one up. Not too difficult probably to tell this one. You got these lamps here, and you got these folks climbing up to the lamps. So yes, these were lamp lighters. My guess is now all of that is completely, it's going to be automated when it gets dark enough at night. Maybe there's a sensor on the top that tells the street lamps when to turn on, and we don't have to have people going up and doing that. Now, this next one's a little bit more difficult maybe to see what's happening, so I'll describe it. The gentleman on the left has a really, really, really long pole going up to the window, and the lady on the right looks like she's holding a straw in her mouth. So I don't know if anybody knows what job that was. It's the same job. They're both doing the same job. He's got a pole and she's got a straw over there. And this job was, believe it or not, a human alarm clock. So yes, these people, their job was to wake people up in the morning by either rapping on their window with a pole or shooting a pea at the window. Of course, nowadays, you probably woke up this morning by your phone beeping, to wake you up. Technology has replaced that. But this was a real job. And the actual name of it, they were called knocker-uppers. And that is what the name of the job was. Probably a very different type of job today if we were to use that phrase. But that is what they used back then for that. All right. Just two more here. In this case, we've got a bunch of folks working in a factory, but I'm curious about the guy who's sitting up here. These folks are actually in a cigar factory, but the gentleman who's sitting up top with this paper, and don't say he's not a supervisor or a school administrator. Nope. This person is actually a lector who entertained factory workers. So they would have somebody read the paper or read a book. This was Pandora. This was iTunes. This is what we had before technology came and gave us that. And our last one, this gentleman here with these very interesting contraption on each side of his head that seems to go out to a large dish on either side there. This was a job that was to be a pre-radar listener for enemy aircraft. So yes, before we had radar, these giant dishes would pick up sound and try to amplify them so that you could swivel around and listen for incoming aircraft. Now, we can look at these and we can laugh, and that's fine. We certainly can. But the point of what I'm saying is people used to think, wow, I got it made. I've got this job. But the world changed around them. And so the same thing is happening with us. Think about our world right now. So let me throw another question out to the Pear Deck group. For those that have joined on Pear Deck, here is this question. What about jobs that exist today? Are there certain jobs that you think when our students eventually graduate are going to be gone, or maybe just not as common? Think about a kindergartner starting, school. It's going to be 12 years before they get out. And if they then, go right into a job, or maybe they do, some additional schooling after that, another 2 or 4 years. What do you think? What are some jobs that exist today that likely may not be around in our students' future? Let's see what are some of the ideas you guys are thinking here. Semi-truck driver. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. With the advent of self-driving cars and trucks, absolutely, that's going to make such a big difference in drivers, whatever the case might be. Whether it's over here, truck driver, taxi driver, bus driver, that is going to make such a big difference in that. Bank tellers, I can't think of the last time I actually interacted specifically with going into the bank. I'm just going up to the ATM. Grocery store cashiers. Yeah, cashiers pretty much anywhere. When I go to Sam's Club, I just throw things in my basket and I use the Sam's Club app to scan them as I put them in. And when I get ready to walk out the door, I just slide the little thing to pay and I just hold up and show the little QR code on the way out. They scan it and they're like, you're good to go. Yeah. And on down the line here. I love this. Hopefully not teachers. Yes. And that's why we're here today. And that's the point, because we don't want to become obsolete. We want to be able to provide value to our students. Absolutely. So yeah, the point is there's a lot of things that are changing, whether it's, in this case, we saw all the changes that came from the pandemic and the effect that's going to have, but also just in normal life, just the way that technology is moving forward. We can't think that we are going to prepare our students for their future if we're preparing them from what we were used to. The world has changed around us and our classroom needs to change. So let me throw out one last question here to you guys, and this will kind of bring us into our final area of our discussion here today. And that is, we'll skip over just a couple of things here. Let's get past that. There we go. And that is, what skills do our students need for their future? So knowing that the world is changing around, here I'll move on to that in Pear Deck for you guys so you guys can start answering that one. Knowing that the world is changing around us, that jobs that maybe were common when we were young won't be for our students, and not being able to predict. I mean, who could have predicted COVID and all the changes that has brought? What skills do we need to be giving to our students so that when they graduate, think about a student who comes out of your school, when they graduate and they go off to get a job or to have a life, what skills do we want to be preparing them with? Again, no right answers, lots of possibilities here. I'm seeing things like critical thinking. Oh, my goodness, absolutely. That's showing up a lot on here. Yeah, we don't know what the questions of the future are. So for students to be able to think about something, to try, to fail, to try again, to poke a stick at it. So important. Research skills. Yeah, absolutely. Being able to find information for themselves. Collaboration. You got it. You got to work with folks, and it may be face-to-face, but maybe not. Maybe they need to learn, how do you collaborate at a distance? How do I work with somebody, through video conferencing, through Google Docs? The point is they're going to be on a team of some sort and working. Absolutely. What else here? The ability to accept change. Yes. To be flexible. That is so true. Technology skills are showing up a lot here. Digital citizenship. Yeah. Being able to conduct yourself well in a digital environment. Social skills. Character education. You got it. I'm with you right there. Work ethic, willingness to take a risk and fail. Creativity. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Not just repeating back what you've been given, but making something new, being creative. That's fantastic. So good, so good, so good. And again, there's no right answer to any one of these, but these are all very good. And Google actually asked this question a couple of years ago. Google has their Grow with Google program inside of Google, where they try to help prepare people with job skills for the future. And so Google hired the Economist Group to interview loads and loads and loads of businesses and ask, what are the most important skills that you want to see as people come to you to try to get a job? And here's the graph that came from that. And you guys nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. Number one skill, 51% of them said problem solving. Then here's teamworking. That's collaboration. Communication, being able to share your ideas with others in a way that makes sense so they can understand you, whether it's face-to-face or if it's electronically or through an email, whatever the case might be. Critical thinking, very much like problem solving. Creativity, and down the line here, there's emotional intelligence. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times we'll try to summarize these and we'll try to pull them together into something that we usually call the 4 C's. I'm sure you've heard that thrown around before, but if not, I'm not referring to these 4 C's for diamonds, which are the color, cut, clarity, and carrot. We're talking about these 4 C's, the 4 C's of education, which is collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. And I in no way mean to say these are the only 4 C's out there, but these are the classic ones that we usually think about when we're talking about the type of skills we want to prepare our students for. We want them to be able to share their ideas clearly with others, whatever medium they're using. We want them to be able to collaborate and work together on a team. We want them to be creative and come up with things and not just give back what we have given to them. And of course, the critical thinking. We want them to be able to solve problems, take risks, fail, iterate, try again. So how do we do that? How do we help our students get prepared? How do we change? How do we let go of our big blank wall that we're used to and try these new processes to help with this purpose of preparing our students for the future? Well, first of all, I'm hoping that's exactly what you're gaining this entire week, that as you've gone through sessions and as you've learned things, you have been picking up these ideas the entire time. I also want to very quickly just run through a couple examples that come from my blog at Control Alt Achieve. The next few slides are all slides that are all activities that are somewhere on my site. There's a blog post, there's a template, there's a video, there's a help guide, there's something on there. And it's just using googly tools, using technology tools in a new creative way, trying to say, okay, we've always used, a word processor, but what can we do with it different? Or we've used a slideshow for presentations, but what else can we do with it? These are the type of projects we need to be shifting to. We need to be using new processes and stepping away from maybe the way we've always done it. So real quick here, I won't pause long on any of these. I'm just going to zip through them. It's ideas like, for example, using Google spreadsheets to create random writing prompts to inspire student creative writing. It's using things like Google Docs and the highlighter tool to create blackout poetry so students can be creative and come up with a poem of their own from a primary text. It can be using things like Google Drawings to do drag and drop poetry, sort of like the magnetic poetry that you do. It's using Google Docs to use emojis and create rebus stories where students are combining text and images together. It's using Google Drawings to make greeting cards. It's using Google Drawings to think creatively and do graphic organizers, maybe compare and contrast or a Freyer model or many of the other graphic organizer ideas that are available out there. It's using things like Google Slides to do the build a snowman or build a jack-o'-lantern activity where students learn some basic computer skills, but then they write about the snowman or the jack-o'-lantern that they have created. It's using Google spreadsheets to make pixel art, and then from pixel art, maybe learn some math, such as, what fraction of the shape different colors represent. It's using things like Google Drawings to create memes where students take an idea from class and distill it down to an image and an idea. It's using Google Drawings or Slides to make posters, to do desktop publishing. It's using Google Slides to mash up videos where you pick a song and you pick a video that go together, maybe a speech or a scientific idea that you're trying to illustrate, and you explain how that video and how that song go together. It's using tools like Google Tour Builder and Google Tour Creator for students to build their own tours where they tell a story, either something from history, or they're explaining a book they've read, or they're doing something autobiographical, or visiting different biomes around the world. It could be using Google Slides to create stop motion animation. It could be using Google's Toontastic to make 3D animated digital puppet shows. It could be using Google Science Journal to collect real-world data from the world around us so students can analyze using their phone as the sensor. It could be using Google Sheets to do learning databases where students collect information as a collaborative group on animals that they're studying or characters from a book or whatever the thing is they're studying, and then using sorting and filtering to investigate that and to answer interesting questions on what they have collected. It could be using tools like Screencastify, which we saw pop up, or any video recording tool that students can use to explain themselves in other ways than just writing. It could be using Google Slides to make choose your own adventure stories, or Google Drawings to investigate mathematics, or Google Drawings to make clickable interactive infographics where you click on them and it jumps you out to additional resources that the students have collected or created. Maybe using Google Slides to make ebooks, using Google Sheets along with Flippity to create educational interactive activities, using things like Google Meet or Zoom or any of the video conferencing tools to connect with, again, other classes around the world, with experts, with authors, and to be able to communicate and collaborate with people that are not next to you. And those are just a couple ideas. Those are just a really quick run through. And then, like I said, every one of those somewhere on my Control Alt Achieve blog, there's a post, there's a video, there's an explanation of how to do each of those different projects. And again, hopefully you are also picking up so many more ideas throughout this week as you've been attending sessions. Because this is really what it comes down to, folks. Like I said, we're not going back to the same classroom. Just like when I moved from the old middle school to the new middle school and I got a new classroom. Every single one of us, we have a new classroom this fall. Maybe it's going to be the same room, but it's changed. The world has changed around us. Maybe it's not. Maybe we're still going to be teaching from our homes. But the point is, the world has changed and is going to continue to change around us. And the important thing for us to do is realize that we may have our own big blank walls. We may be used to doing things a certain way. used to certain processes, and we've been kind of pushed out of the nest. We've been kind of pushed out of our comfort zone, whether we liked it or not. But I would encourage you to reflect on that yourself and say, there are so many tools. There are so many amazing ways that we can help our students. But what is it we're really trying to accomplish? What's the purpose? Well, it's to help our students, to help them learn, to grow, and to succeed. And the beauty is there are so many tools we can use that can make that even better. So as we start to wrap up here today, that is sort of my challenge to you, is take some time and reflect. Think, do you have a big blank wall, or do you have several big blank walls? Are there things that you need to rethink and let go of and say, you know what? Yeah, I've always done it that way, but it's time to try something new. And so I would encourage you to embrace that change and to try something new. You don't have to do every one of the projects that was mentioned here. We don't have to change every single thing, but start making some of those, trying out some new processes, again, for the ultimate purpose of helping our students to grow, to learn, and to succeed. And I just want to say thank you so much for letting me be a part of that learning process and to be with you guys today. And I'm so excited to see what everybody does going forward. So thank you so much for having me here, guys.
It was our pleasure. I think you gained a lot of followers today. I've been using your jack-o'-lantern and your poetry and everything I could find for years, but I think you'll have some new followers now.
Well, hey, fantastic. And the thing I always say is if your students do use any of those projects, please let me know. I mean, you don't have to ask permission. That's the thing. They're out there to use. But what I'm saying is on the other end of it, I would love to see what they make. It just can't tell you how much it brightens my day when I get a tweet and somebody says, hey, look at what we did today in class. And they show some student work, because that's just so awesome to know that a student has been impacted. And please feel free to take and modify any of the things. If there's something I've done here and you go, I like that, but I want to put my own twist on it, you got it. Everything on the site's totally free to use any way you want. And like I said, feel free to grab it from the site, from the podcast, from the webinars, or from the book, which has a lot of those same ideas right there in the book.
Yes, you have a book that just came out. We want to make sure that we mentioned that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it is awesome. It's great.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you so much. And we will add that book to the follow-up email at the end of the week so that people can easily grab it. We also want to remind everybody that they can get their professional growth points with the link that's scrolling on the bottom or the link that's in all the descriptions of the videos. And thank you so much, Eric, for joining us and especially for sharing and making all of the things just so easy to grab, easy to use. And also, I want to encourage everybody, like Eric said, to, when you use it, share it. Like, tell us about it. Add him to a text or a tweet. Add us to a tweet. We can't wait to share all the great things that you guys are doing in your classrooms because we're in it together, especially this year.
They're bookmarking your page already.
All right. Fantastic.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks.